to Katie.
It's not that compared to
We're
what's
ready
going
when it's
on.
not so red.
Okay.
That's the thing.
So-
They used to own.
I will call the regular city commission meeting for Wednesday, July 18th to order. It is 7 o'clock. We had an executive session earlier under ORS 19260, paragraph 2E, to conduct deliberations with persons designated by the governing body to negotiate real property transactions, and I, to review and evaluate the employment-related performance of the chief executive officer of any public body, a public officer, employee, or staff member who does not request an open hearing. If you'll call roll, please.
Commissioner Shaw,
Here?
Commissioner Mengelberg. Here. Commissioner Ide. Here. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Here.
Mayor Holliday.
Here. If you'll please stand and join me in flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so we are three ceremonies and proclamations, 18-337, Northwest Naturals Low Carbon Pathway Presentation. Who's got this?
This is Nina Carlson from Northwest Natural. She'll be providing you a presentation this evening.
Okay. Welcome.
So Mr. Mayor, Council, City staff, thank you guys very much for having me. My name is Nina Carlson and I'm the Local Government Affairs Liaison for Northwest Natural. And kind of my reason to bring this to you today, first of all, while our company I feel does a really good job providing people with heat and maintaining our pipeline, maybe the one thing we don't do is tell our story and the things that we are working on for our ratepayers, probably ahead of carbon legislation that we see that's probably going to come out of Salem this next year. And we're seeing it in Olympia too. So what I'm bringing you today is a little presentation. Our company about 5 years ago looked at our business model and talked and investigated where we felt we had risks. And the number one place that we really felt was a threat for our company was carbon legislation, and we knew if it was something that was prescribed on us, it would be harder to address than if we kind of charted our own course and proactively made some changes. So that's what I'm going to give you here today. This is a very high-level presentation. Feel free to stop me at any time. If you have more technical questions, I can try and field those, but most likely I will take your information and then get you to one of our subject matter experts. In addition, at the end, if you guys have just general questions about our company, projects in town, you're welcome to go ahead and quiz me up. So here we go. So like I said before, we recognize that a low carbon future is is in the future, and we believe that climate change is real and that we are uniquely suited as your local distribution company for a greenhouse causing fossil fuel to play an important role in mitigating climate change. And it kind of develops into three distinctive objectives. The first one being a long-term goal of deep decarbonization. And what that means is making all of our energy and our grid and our systems as clean and green as they possibly can, but more importantly, leaving no one behind. It's not just those who can afford really expensive, efficient equipment. It's for all of our communities. And so we have to put into place business practices that really make sure it encompasses all of the community. Second of all, we believe that we can take near-term actions that leverage our infrastructure already in place. And one of the things regarding this is we like to brag that we are probably the tightest natural gas system in the country. And we in fact have no bare steel left in our system, which allows for very few leaks. And we maintain a leakage program that is much stricter than what we're regulated to do. And then the third thing, because we're a fairly large local distribution company, we really can lead the way on innovation, both from the equipment or burner tip, all the way to the wellhead from how we purchase and how that gas is transported. So if you take nothing more away from this presentation here today, this is probably the most important one. The pie chart up on the upper right shows where Oregon's greenhouse emissions come from. And you can see that transportation kind of overwhelmingly is the largest emitter of greenhouse gases, with electricity generation being at 30% and then natural gas usage at 12%. And our customers comprise about 8% of that. And for that 8%, you might ask, what am I getting? We basically serve in our service territory of between 730 and 740,000 customers from the border all the way down the valley to Eugene, a good portion of the coast and out to the Dalles. We serve 74% of the residential square footage in heat and hot water. And on that really cold morning, when the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing, we can provide up to 90% of the peak energy. So that's really key. So when everyone's needing that, it's really cold, everyone's needing a lot of power, we're there for that. And for all that usage, we are basically only generating 8% of the greenhouse gases in the state. But we do believe we can do better. So what is our goal? It's pretty simple. If you took a 2015 baseline, we are hoping by 2035 to achieve 30% carbon savings. And that basically breaks down into 3 different buckets. Number 1 is reducing the carbon intensity of our product. That's by maintaining a very tight system, like I spoke of before, working with upstream methane producers to make sure that they're using best practices and maintaining very tight systems. There are a couple other things that I'll touch on in a minute, talking about renewable natural gas, or RNG, and power to gas, which is kind of an exciting new technology that we're piloting. Second of all would be with our customers. And what a lot of folks don't know is that we actually are a decoupled utility. We were the first natural gas utility to be decoupled. And what that means is the gas that we sell you as a pass-through. We don't actually make money on that gas. We make money on the infrastructure in the ground. So it is completely good in our business model to go ahead and help our customers achieve energy efficiency and gas savings. So we like to say, use less and offset the rest. Additionally, we have programs which I'll touch on a little bit more, kind of equivalent to PGE's clean energy. We have what we call smart energy, and I'll touch upon that more in the future. And then we talk about equipment. That's a big place where we can really drive the market to help introduce new and more efficient equipment and test it out and make it become more accessible to folks. And the third area is transportation. And while we readily agree that the small or passenger cars are great for electric vehicles, we really feel that CNG, or compressed natural gas, is a great place for heavy haul, return to base, fleet kind of equipment, and we'll touch a little bit more about that in a minute. So our product, I talked about 2 projects that we're working on that are pretty exciting. The first one is methane recovery. So our emissions are based upon often things that we have no control over. The wastewater treatment plant in Portland in the past has flared off the methane that is produced from the wastewater treatment plant. We've worked with them to be able to install the equipment to scrub that methane, and instead of flaring it off into the atmosphere, they're able to capture that, clean it, and either fuel vehicles at the site for the city, and that which they can't use, we can buy back and put it back on our pipe. So that's kind of an exciting, it's a fairly large project. And the neat thing is they will be able to pay that off in about a 3-year period of time, which is much shorter than what they had originally thought would happen. So they will be able to basically sell that RNG back, and in 3 years, they'll be making a profit on it. Additionally, this is some technology that is new to the market, and we are working with another power producer outside of our region to pilot this. It's called power to gas. And basically, what that means is a lot of times when renewables are being generated, especially like in the spring when the flows in the rivers are robust and the sun is shining, a lot of renewable power is produced, but maybe the grid can't take it at that time. Battery storage right now is still pretty expensive. It's maybe not as reliable. So what we're working with is to take that extra electricity, use hydrolysis to be able to pull the hydrogen atoms off of it, and we can store up to about 15% hydrogen on our pipe without affecting the quality of our methane there. So you can see our pipe is basically an energy storage facility as well as a transmission facility. So we're working with that, and we're excited to see the implications of that and see if we can expand that to other places. And then the last thing is really working with our upstream producers to make sure best practices and the best technology is used in extraction, so no methane is lost in basically the harvesting of it. So our customers, I talked a little bit about technology. We really work very hard with other gas utilities around the nation to pilot and to promote new, highly efficient products that are coming onto the market, such as a gas heat pump hot water heater. When this new technology comes on, we'll often give it to a few of our contractors to have them test it out and to make sure that it's really all that it's cracked up to be, and to make sure that it can be brought into the marketplace. Additionally, we always find that gas is really a good choice to work with, like say solar or other renewables, because it is a great backup. You can use solar while that's available and then have your gas for when it's not. And additionally, we have what we call our Smart Energy Program, which is basically folks can put a little overage on their bill, $5 to $6 a month. That money is pooled and administered by Climate Trust, and they seek projects that do either methane or carbon sequestration or carbon recapture, like helping a dairy farmer afford the equipment to capture the methane from his dairy farm and be able to use it on premises. So we do a lot of things. It's just often not really talked about, but it's a pretty exciting program, and I really urge anybody who has gas service that they might want to go on our website, take a look at it, and see if it's something they want to sign up for. And transportation is probably one of the easiest and most exciting technologies, but it's just not talked about a lot. For instance, Waste Management across the nation uses a lot of what we call CNG, or compressed natural gas, for their return to base vehicles. The nice thing is it's about 20% cleaner than the cleanest diesel available. Additionally, it's often found to be much quieter, and probably even one of the most exciting things, it basically helps reduce the smog-causing pollutants that diesel, it's about 90% cleaner than a diesel vehicle. And that often matters because a lot of those communities that that are on major trafficked areas by return to base or fleet vehicles, they really suffer from pollution locally, and this is a way that that can be mitigated. Additionally, if you run your compressed natural gas vehicle on a renewable natural gas, you can achieve even a greater carbon emissions savings. And they're not a lot more expensive than a diesel vehicle. The good thing is we know that people talk about electric trucks and vehicles like that. That technology has not proven itself out in this heavy duty market, but this technology is here, it's proven, and it's very exciting, but we need our partners in our jurisdictions and our school districts to at least think about it and bring us in when they're making those big decisions, so we can help them run some numbers to see what a CNG vehicle would do in their fleet.
Question.
Sure.
Is there the possibility of retrofitting some of the existing diesel heavy-duty equipment into this lower emitting fuel?
Well, I know that we have quite a few vehicles on our fleet, and they call them dual fuel. And I know that they run, I'm not sure if they run off of diesel and CNG, or if it's gas and CNG. I do believe you can retrofit, but a lot of other jurisdictions basically are looking at their portfolio, and with the environmental standards that their city might want to hit, they look at different options when they're getting ready to do replacement cycles of their fleets. But I would say that they're probably, if I'm remembering right, which this is not my forte, but I do believe that they can do that, but typically you want the newer ones because they have the best, latest technology, rather than spending the money to retrofit something and not having it as good as you could buy it in a new product. So, end of all of this is basically, this is our campaign that we're trying to get out to both of our city leaders like you folks and our basic customers about Less We Can, where we ask folks to look into what we're currently doing ahead of them, because with carbon legislation coming, that stuff will be affected in rates, and we're trying to do what we can to make sure that we are proactively addressing this. So I urge you to maybe take a peek at this website, and I'm open for questions if you have them.
Anybody? No?
I have a question. We're trying to build an industrial park out near the high school, and natural gas is one of those amenities that a lot of industries look for. What is your plans for serving it?
So what we do typically with that is I would talk to your economic development director, probably put him in contact with our major account services group, and they are the folks that basically will work with cities to identify what kinds of tenants or what types of businesses they think would be suited in that park. Also kind of go through their energy use, what that looks like, and what it would cost for us to build it, or if with the usage that those companies would do in 5 years, if it would be something that we could install knowing that we'd get that payback within 5 years from their usage. But we have a whole team from engineers to Salesforce that will work one-on-one with your economic development folks, and I will make sure that they either have my contact, which I'm pretty sure they do, and then we'll get them in contact with that. But I know that we are pretty well served in the city of Oregon City, with the exception of some of the rockier spots up top.
Thank you.
So I presume there's significant capital expenditures involved in achieving these efficiencies?
Well, with this, it's the thing with the strategies that we're doing in our business practices, we've already really worked very hard to reduce our carbon footprint. That's where it's kind of tough for us because we're not the end user consuming the product. We are basically having to work both on an educational side through our building contractors, our heating, ventilation, and air conditioning contractors, our city partners, business partners, to look at their practices and see what we can do to help them. So really the capital expenditures are not on our side because we basically are just the transmission company. It's the end user that is creating the emissions, but in the end, we will be the one who will pay the carbon tax on the emissions from our end users.
Well, I understand that. I guess the key question is there any effect on the end users' rates that you foresee coming out from this?
It really will depend on how the if and how the carbon legislation is put together in Salem. So kind of like with anything else, the devil's in the details. And depending on how, I do know that at the beginning, because our product is already very, very clean, the rate impacts probably wouldn't be as serious, but for us to really reduce heavily our emissions, it will be very, very tough because it's already a very clean product used very efficiently. I mean, at the burner tip, it's anywhere between 80 to 95% efficient at the burner tip. So it's difficult, and additionally, I believe the governor's numbers start with a 1990 baseline with no accounting for population growth. And I don't know if you guys have seen much population growth since 1990 here.
Only a little.
I'm curious if in the long run, there's a time when incentives were provided to homeowners to upgrade, like in my case, I put in a 95+% efficient furnace, the best thing I ever did. And there was incentives that were, are they part of this program?
Well, basically we have those. What we have is a preferred contractor program, and using those contractors, they offer certain incentives. The company offers certain incentives, and then there are incentives from Energy Trust of Oregon. So you can kind of pool those. They work basically for folks who are either converting to natural gas or who are upgrading that are current customers but are upgrading, say, an old 80% efficient furnace to like a 95. There are still incentive programs, and we work with both our contractors and Energy Trust every day. We have a gentleman who that's his whole deal, is to work with folks and make sure that they are getting the best equipment, most efficient, and making sure that they're getting those rebates.
So we can expect and anticipate a visit from Al Gore in recognition of the carbon tax credits you're going to generate?
Well, I don't know about that, but the one thing we do like to say is today people are paying about the same for gas they did between 15 and 20 years ago. So there's not very many items in your home that you can say that about.
What is the primary source of your natural gas?
We get most of ours from either British Columbia or Alberta, and it comes down through the Williams pipeline. And then the start of our service territory, we take it off of Williams pipeline at what we call a city head gate, and then we take ownership of it. But it mostly comes out of Canada.
Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, thank you.
Thank you
Appreciate it.
guys very much for this, and I encourage you guys to check out our Less We Can campaign, and thank you for your time.
Thanks, Nina.
Thank you. All right, moving on. So now we are at citizen comment, and I see I have 1, 2, 3. More than that, or just the 3, Kate?
Just the 3.
All right, so I remind you that you have 3 minutes to present information relevant to the city but not listed as an item on the agenda. And everybody's filled out a form, I take it. Okay, then I'll call up the first two, Tom O'Brien and Bob Mahoney.
those out. I'll pass them out. Thank you. Could I get one more? I'm sorry. 5 and 1 for me. Sorry. Thanks.
Tom O'Brien, Oregon City. Good evening, Mayor Holliday, Commissioners Ide, Minkelberg, O'Donnell, and Shaw. I've handed each of you 3 very nice 4-color glossy brochures. Each brochure depicts a tour to promote tourism within different areas of Clackamas County. I'll ask that you open the one titled Farmlandia Farm Loop, has the green border. It contains a map as well as 17 places for people to visit. 5 of these are located in Wilsonville, 4 in Milwaukee, including the Milwaukee Farmers Market. 4 are in West Lynn, 1 each in Lake Oswego, Tualatin, Clackamas, Sherwood. Note, none are in Oregon City, not even our Oregon City Farmers Market. On the reverse side, in the lower right corner, is a listing of sponsors who paid for this expensive brochure. I think you'll recognize the Oregon City logo. The brochures for Canby Farm Loop and the Molalla Farm Loops, which I've handed you as well, are likewise sponsored by Oregon City. The Molalla brochure does list a place that is located 5¼ miles southeast of our city limits, the Forest Edge Vineyard on Spangler Road. These are examples that one of our city departments has used taxpayer money to promote venues that have no benefit to Oregon City taxpayers. This shows signs of incompetency on the part of its department manager and is probably unethical, if not actually illegal. I'd like to suggest that whichever department is responsible for this waste have their budget reduced for the next budget cycle and also receive an audit as soon as possible to determine what other wastes are presently occurring in that department. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mahoney,
I'm gonna put my hat back on.
you're fine.
I'd like to make a quick comment.
Anybody here see the movies?
Oh, 1 second, Bob.
Just a small correction. I'm looking here at the Canby Farm Loop and I'm seeing Christopher Bridge Wines with the Oregon City address. And I'm seeing Via Catalana Cellars with the Oregon
There
City
are a lot of
address.
places that have an Oregon City address which are not physically in Oregon City, nor do they pay taxes to Oregon City. And these are taxpayer dollars being spent on these.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Mahoney?
Okay, once again, anybody here see the movie Scully? One of my favorite movies. Remember, was the pilot that landed in Sudley?
Yeah.
Okay, and he did it under very strenuous circumstances. He stepped up to the bat and he served, saved all those people. During the course of the public hearing after the crash, they were trying to hang it on him. And he knew he wasn't responsible for that crash, but nobody was listening until all of the information started to come out and the computer models were being used. And finally, after everything was considered, he looked at those people and he said, "Can't we get serious now?" And they kind of went back, "What do you mean?" And he repeated, "Let's get serious about this thing now." The other day, I had the occasion to watch this gentleman to my right, whom I consider a friend. But when I walked into this meeting tonight, I told him to duck. And the reason I did is I saw something on the TV that I consider to be silly, just silly. Asking you people to resign because you're not of noble character. That in and of itself is not serious. We're not taking That's serious. So let's get serious about this. You people are here to serve and you do a good job. And you're all noble in my eyes, okay? I don't wear this thing for fun and games. I don't wear it to show off. I don't even know I got it on most of the time. Anybody that served realizes that. And I get a lot of people coming up to me, I don't even know, that want to tell me their story about how they served. And I just listen. I just listen. Most of you people that know me, Mahoney, you listening? All he does is talk.
When was that?
And he doesn't say much. But I'm here to tell you, from my point of view, that you people stand out in my eyes. You're here to serve. You're taking on all of these problems that are thrown at you, you know, ad infinitum, and solving the public's business when nobody else has decided to get serious and step up to the plate. And I applaud you for doing that. I really do. And I make no apologies for my feelings, because there are people out there that take you for granted and they don't give a rip about you, and not even enough to step up to the plate and vote. But they'll throw rocks and stones at you. Not me. Not me. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, Bob.
Semper Fi, buddy.
I won't comment on that, and I've already commented on Tom O'Brien's last appearance, but I do think it's a valid question, is what economic benefit do we expect to derive from participation in this pamphlet? And, you know, maybe it doesn't need to be explained tonight, but maybe it could be.
Yeah, I think that's a question that we can take offline.
I think so too.
Then last one is the ever-present Mr. Gifford.
He's back.
Apparently he's been gone for a month. We haven't seen him for a while. We're getting ready to send out search parties.
It's nice to be missed. Mr. Mayor, City
We can say
Commissioners,
that.
my name is William Gifford and I live in Oregon City. A question of growth came up during the presentation by PGE and I thought it was a valid question. And I think that the subject, I beg your pardon?
Northwest Natural.
I'm sorry, Northwest Natural, thank you very much. I think the subject of growth has so many dimensions and so many facets and so many nuances, and it's possibly one of the most contentious issues that we have in this city is growth, the whole subject of growth. And to that end, this will surprise you, the Oregon City Business Alliance is presenting a two-part series on the subject of growth. Part one is going to be on the housing issue, and part two is going to be on employment and business growth. And I certainly invite all of you and anyone listening to attend next Tuesday, my birthday, please make a note, on the 24th. Oh, Shaw, you should
Is
know.
that 94?
1894.
You opened the door.
On Tuesday, July 24th, from 11:30 to 1, please come and enjoy a great lunch at the Abernathy Center. And listen, we're going to be having a 6-panel discussion group. So we have the chief demographer from Portland State University. We're having the chief the senior regional planner from Metro. We're having the facilities manager from Oregon City Schools. We're having a realtor. We're having a developer, and and we're having a senior planner from Oregon City as well. And we're very excited to get this conversation really in depth. So I'd encourage any and all of you to attend. Thank you.
Thanks, William.
Thank you. Anybody else for public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on. Is everybody okay with the agenda?
Yes.
All right, then we'll move on. PC 18-096, first reading of ordinance 18-1010, remand of Land Use Board of Appeals court decision for planning files PZ 1501, comprehensive plan amendment, and ZC 1503, zone change located near Breivik Road and Highway 213. Ms. Turway.
Thank you very much. Assistant City Attorney Carrie Richter with our legal framework and disclosures.
All right, a public hearing on a land use matter is scheduled for tonight. A staff report has been prepared and been made available to the public 7 days before tonight's hearing. The staff report analyzes the approval criteria that apply to this proposal. Staff has analyzed the criteria along with written comments and input received through the public notification process. The quasi-judicial hearing procedure that the commission will follow is set out in state law and the Oregon City Municipal Code. The hearing procedure steps are shown on the chart right over here. The Planning Commission has recommended approval of the application, and the matter is now before the City Commission for final consideration, and the City Commission's review is on the record. So argument is allowed, but no new evidence. Also, this matter is limited to the the limited issue on remand. We can talk a little bit more about that as we move on. Anyone who wishes to speak on this matter should fill out a speaker's card and give it to the city recorder. Speakers will proceed in the order in which their card is received. For the public record, please begin all testimony stating your name and whether you reside or have a business within the city. Argument should be directed toward the applicable approval criteria. A person may submit written material while the public record is open so long as it does not contain new evidence and is limited to the issue on remand. Any written materials mailed to the city staff during the time period when the record is open will be placed in the record. Written materials submitted during the public hearing must be presented to the city staff in order to become part of the record. If the City Commission makes a decision with which you disagree, any issue that you may wish to appeal must have been raised for the City's Commission's consideration. Without raising the issue on the record with sufficient specificity and accompanied by statements or evidence that the city and all parties can respond, the issue will not be adjudged appealable to the State Land Use Board of Appeals. In addition, Oregon Revised Statute 197796 requires us to announce the following. The failure of an applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issues precludes an action for damages in circuit court. At this time, I'm going to ask if any commissioner has any ex parte contacts, conflicts of interest, bias, or any other statement to declare. And I'd be interested to know if any commissioner has visited the site.
Visited the site.
Same.
No.
No bias, no conflicts of interest. And I have not visited the site.
No conflict of interest, no ex parte contacts. I've not visited the site.
Does any person in the audience wish to question the commissioners regarding these representations? Seeing none, we'll move along with the staff report. Ms. Turway.
Thank you very much. So we're here for a remand from a decision. The original proposal came in as a site a little more than 15 acres near the intersection of Beaver Creek and 213. The applicant had proposed a zone change for the property. As you can see on the left, there was a variety of zoning designations, all residential, and those had various comprehensive plan designations. The proposal would rezone the entire property to the mixed-use corridor 2 zoning designation and the mixed-use corridor comprehensive plan designation. The city had approved the application. That application was appealed to LUBA and then to the Court of Appeals, and then the state Supreme Court refused to hear the case. LUBA's decision, LUBA considered the appeal on 11 issues or so, and they wrote quite a lengthy decision. The city prevailed on all issues except one. And so LUBA said that Oregon City needs to look at this case again to consider one issue solely. So this remand process went back to the City Commission, and then you remanded it back to Planning Commission to take a look at. We kind of did this hearing process again. And the hearing process was limited to the scope of this one issue, which is a Goal 5 resources. So what the court said is that we did not clearly define if the uses in the new commercial zoning designation could conflict with Goal 5 resources. The Goal 5 resources means a lot of things. The only Goal 5 acknowledged resource in this area is Knoll Creek. So the question before the commission is the uses that are allowed in MUC 2 versus the uses that are allowed in those various residential zoning designations, could they have any potential impact on Knoll Creek? You can see on the map, Knoll Creek is across 213, and then there's some parts of the feature that go through the site as well. No other concerns were identified within the remand, so it's singly and limited to this one particular issue. So this is a complicated decision matrix, but this is what is before you tonight. So the question is, does Oregon City have an adequate program to protect Knoll Creek from the higher intensity use of MUC2? Should you decide that we have sufficient framework in place to protect Knoll Creek, then there's no further analysis that's done. We put evidence in the record that I'll talk about in a second. If you agree with that evidence, then we make our decision, and then that's the end of this. Should you decide that we don't have sufficient framework to protect Knoll Creek, then we've got two choices before us. One is you deny the application because we don't have sufficient evidence to show that if they build something commercial-esque, that the water won't be protected, or the creek. Or we go through an analysis to do an additional look at what we can do to make sure that it is protected. So you consider if the new uses could be protected, and you would potentially adopt additional protections if you need to. So the first question that we're asking, though, is, are there any potential conflicts? If yes, there are potential conflicts, then you either deny the application or you look into it further and reach a conclusion from there. So our protections, or the frameworks that we have in place to protect Knoll Creek, are a couple. The first thing is our Natural Resource Overlay District, and that is it's written in our code in chapter 1749. It includes provisions for protections of streams. Generally, it talks about building away from the stream, things like that. The other thing that we have is a variety of standards related to stormwater. They also relate to erosion control and sediment control. We have a stormwater and grading design standards that are in place. We have code associated with that as well. And we have our erosion and sediment control. The code associated with that is chapter 1747 of our code. The last thing we have is our National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, or the NPDES MS4 permit. And within those frameworks, the question is, do those provide enough standards to assure that there is no potential conflict with the new intensive uses? There's a lot of evidence in the record related to both the Natural Resource Overlay District and these group together. We have our engineering manager, Josh Wheeler, here to talk about any of the technical expertise or answer any questions you have as well. That's the high level. So our conclusion is that we believe that we do have enough regulatory framework to protect Knoll Creek from the higher intensive uses in the mixed use corridor. I should also note that within the zone change, there are some uses that they are not allowed to do, which would otherwise be allowed to do in mixed use corridor too. So in their proposal, they didn't want to do certain things. So we're just looking at the net differences for the uses that are allowed within their proposal. I do have recommended motions for you later on when we get to that phase, but I'm here to answer any questions you have, as well as our engineering manager, Josh Wheeler.
Can you go back to the first slide where you have a map?
Yeah, the aerial photo.
No, one more.
Yep.
One more. That one.
Uh-huh.
So in looking at this, it looks like there's a stretch of Knoll Creek that is on the property, is that correct?
Yeah, there is a stretch of a feature that goes through the property.
And is that open or is that in a pipe?
It's open.
All
It's
right.
not piped.
Okay, thank you.
Well, that's the part that we're looking at to be protected, is that correct?
Yeah, so when the property goes to develop, do we have sufficient remedies in place to assure that it is protected?
And then go back to the map that talks about the NAROD overlay.
That's the purple buffer area. So generally, so if you have any development that occurs on site, they would have to stay out of the purple, or they could delineate the feature. We protect streams through vegetated corridors, which are lush native vegetation. So go stream, lush native vegetation, then development. And so our regulatory scheme talks about how we protect streams through those buffers and plantings.
So it's possible with more intensive vegetation and other treatment that overlay may be smaller as long as the stream is protected.
The overlay district is a little bit wider than the stream area likely. So what we did a lot of work to figure out where our overlay districts are. So we use a lot of LiDAR data and other specific data, but we made our buffer at least 10 feet wider on either side. So in case the feature, we were off by mapping, there was a little bit of leeway there. So an applicant could, in theory, get some consultants on site to say, actually, the vegetated corridor is only X wide, but the overlay district is a little bit wider, and then they would delineate that feature, and then our natural resource overlay district has standards to tell us to not build within the vegetated corridor, or discourages building within the vegetated corridor. And then if you do, there's mitigation and other things that would have to occur.
Thank you.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Just a question. Having watched a number of planning commission meetings, did they not tender a decision? I remember seeing some excerpts on discussions about contaminants and water temperatures, a lot of testimony given. Did the planning commission tender a recommendation on this, or is this new information?
The planning commission did review this both times. They reviewed it originally, and then Luba said we didn't have enough in the record to prove that we didn't have any potential conflicts. And so then they reviewed this remand and they recommended approval of the remand. So they found that there was sufficient evidence in the regulatory scheme to protect the feature at the new intensive use.
I just felt that was critical information is why I asked. Thank you.
Anybody else?
And that was the question there too, is for planning, so.
Commissioner Hyde? Okay, then that's it for staff report. I will open the public hearing. And we have Garrett Stevenson for the applicant.
Good evening. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Good evening, Mayor Holliday and Commissioners. My name is Garrett Stevenson for the applicant. And you're going to have to bear with me tonight. I'm testifying in Mike Robinson's place, who I know has been before you a number of times. So I apologize. I might not have the command over the facts quite as much as Mike does, but I'm going to certainly do my best to go through this as simply and quickly as I can. I think that Ms. Turway did a great job describing what's before you tonight. And that is a very simple question, which is, are the city's existing protections of the Goal 5 resource, in this case Newell Creek, are those sufficient given the new MUC zoning to protect those Goal 5 resources? And our position and the Planning Commission's findings was that they are. Primarily, you have those Goal 5 resources protected by the Natural Resources Overlay District, and that district is not changing with this zone change. So although the base zoning is going to change to MUC, the INROD is going to remain in place. And so that applies just as if it were zoned anything else, just as if it were single family. In looking at this, I think what the Planning Commission found and what was apparent to me when I looked at the record is really the only difference that you're going to have in the development types is a little bit more impervious surface with a more high density commercial type product than if you're doing single family homes. And the way we deal with that is to make sure that we've got stormwater facilities that are large enough to handle that additional runoff and the additional speed of that runoff. And of course, we have to under the city's stormwater design manual and stormwater code. So that's really the simple question that Luba asked. Their remand was in the nature of requiring the city to go back and make a finding one way or the other about whether or not the city's existing Goal 5 protections were sufficient, and to specifically find whether or not there is a conflict between the MUC2 zone and the protected resource. We went before the Planning Commission, as you guys might recall. We came back after the remand and asked to actually remand that one step down to the Planning Commission so that we could have a de novo hearing, allowed new evidence to come in, and new evidence did come in, closed the hearing. The Planning Commission deliberated and found that, just as we had argued originally before LUBA and then again before the Planning Commission, the existing protections that the city has are sufficient, notwithstanding the fact that we're changing this to a more intense base zone. So there's two questions that came up I wanted to very quickly address. Commissioner Mangelberg's question about whether or not that stream is open and what sort of protections are in place. Again, the INROD is going to protect that stream. We're not proposing to change that in any way. We'll have to comply with that provision of the code. And in the metro region, those stormwater and riparian controls are the primary way that streams and rivers and so on, they're the primary way that they're protected. And Metro requires through Titles 3 and 13, Nature and Neighborhoods programs, that all of the jurisdictions within Metro's jurisdiction adopt standards requiring protection of riparian resources. And that's exactly what the INROD does. It's intended to make sure that there's a lot of vegetation around those open streams to shade them, to filter the water coming in, and none of that is changing with this zone change. The other question, Commissioner O'Donnell, you had a question about pollutants. In 2015, the city updated its MS4 NPDES program, and that went through DEQ, and they found that that program, which will apply to future development on this site, is sufficiently protective of water quality for all the identified pollutants that have been an issue in this case. So I think we've got a very good record that supports this. We've got letters and testimony from Tom Sissel, who was our project engineer, talking about the city's stormwater standards, NPDES permits, those sorts of things, explaining how those protect water quality in the city. There was an argument that came up about whether those standards in particular implemented Goal 5. We found in the city's comprehensive plan that those standards and development requirements did in fact implement Goal 5, that the city intended them to be part of its Goal 5 program. But in addition to that, of course, we have the INROD. And you have a letter from Stacy Reed in the record, who looked at the INROD to determine whether or not that is sufficiently protective of the Goal 5 resource. She found that it did. And she went one step farther, a step that's not required tonight, but she did actually conduct an ESEE analysis of changing the zone to MUC2. She found that on balance, that the MUC2 zone was equally protective and did not conflict any more with identified Goal 5 resources, Newell Creek in this case, than did the prior single-family zoning. So those are some of the highlights. There's other evidence in the record which supports us, though all of that evidence is talked about in the Planning Commission's findings. I'm not seeing any confused faces too much. How
many times can you tell me the same story?
Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spare you all, and I think we are ready to have the commission make a decision tonight. We would like to make sure that the record gets closed tonight. I suppose I will be ready to rebut any new argument that's offered tonight. But what I'd like to do is go ahead and be quiet and allow you guys to ask me any questions that you might have. And before I do that, I respectfully request that you affirm the Planning Commission's decision.
Just a quick question. At this point, at the point where Newell Creek Canyon crosses the property, are there any anadromous fish? No? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, whoever that was. No.
What was the question on Andromeda's fish, not migratory fish? Is that what the question was? I didn't hear it.
Yes.
Okay.
Anadromous
The answer
fish.
is no. Okay.
It's grade separations impossible.
The answer is no.
They
The
can't,
answer is no.
they
There are
can't
flying
leap that
fish.
high. Gotcha.
Commissioner, do you have anything?
No, I think that it's very clear that all of the analysis shows that there's a reason why the planning commission voted 6-0 to approve, so.
Commissioner Shaw?
No, there's a lot of protections here already involved. Our code's up to date on this, so I
Just
think we're ready to
specific
go.
questions for this gentleman?
Yeah. No.
Okay, then we're gonna move on. And do we have any representatives of recognized neighborhood associations? Government agencies? Other incorporated public interest organization? Individuals? No testimony? Okay, then I will close the public hearing, and I would give the applicant a chance to rebut, but since there was nothing said, then there's no rebuttal necessary. And we will then, questions for staff from anybody?
I don't have any.
Anything? No. I have one question, and we going back in time. So back in time before the new bus barn for the school district was built, this is the same site that the bus barn was on, is that right?
Correct.
And was their parking lot gravel or was it paved?
I don't think that's in this record. You want to answer, Carrie?
Yeah, go ahead.
It's paved.
Okay, all right, that's all I want to know.
And then the assistant city attorney has some legal
Of course she does.
things for you regarding evidence in the record.
Okay, so you all have before you the findings, the proposed findings that we put in the packet. In those findings, the planning commission rejected a number of documents that were submitted because they were beyond the limited scope of remand. Those findings also included some discussion of a letter submitted by Ms. Shaw Spady that was submitted before the last hearing. Goes through that letter in fairly close detail and talks about what things are sort of out and what things are in. So assuming that you are planning to approve this application, the motion ought to include adoption of these findings that would state that you will not consider that you're not going to consider portions of the Spady letter that are beyond the scope of the remand. Similar to what we've done before in other cases where we say, things came in, we're not going to consider them.
Is that it?
Yes?
So discussion? Anybody?
Nope.
Is there a motion?
We said those, you had motions there, or did you have motions for it?
They're on they're on your
Oh,
screen.
right here, okay, there you go.
I move to approve the closure of the record and reapproval of planning files PZ 15-01, comprehensive plan amendment, and ZC 15-03, zone change located near Beaver Creek Road and Highway 213, and first reading of ordinance 18-1010 with revised findings to be adopted during the second reading of the ordinance on August 1st, and also to adopt the, we did the findings.
Is that good enough for you?
That's fine.
Oh, okay.
Is there a
Go
second?
further.
Second.
Ms. Richter?
Ordinance number 18-1010, an ordinance, the City of Oregon City amending the comprehensive plan map and Title 17 zoning, Chapter 17.06.020, the official zoning map of the Oregon City Municipal Code by changing the designation of the following properties. Clackamas County Map 3-2E-04C, tax lot 700, 702, 900, 1,201, 1,400 from MR, medium density residential comprehensive plan designation to MUC, mixed use corridor comprehensive plan designation, and from R 3.5 dwelling district zoning designation to the MUC2 mixed use corridor district zoning designation. Clackamas County Map 3-2E-04C, tax lot 1,300, and 3-2E-04CD, tax lot 6,000, from the LR Low Density Residential Comprehensive Plan Designation to the MUC Mixed Use Corridor Comprehensive Plan Designation, and from the R6 Single Family Dwelling District Zoning Designation to the MUC Mixed Use Corridor District Zoning Designation, and Clackamas County Map 3 2E 04C, tax lot 1500 and 1600, and 3 2E 04CD, tax lot 3300, 5900, and 6000 from the LR Low Density Residential Comprehensive Plan designation to the MUC Mixed Use Corridor Comprehensive Plan designation, and from the R10 Single Family Dwelling District zoning designation to MUC Mixed Use Corridor District zoning designation. Not my
I think I
fault.
might have missed something in the first sentence. You wanna
Yeah,
try it?
it was,
Start again?
Really.
No, that was all one sentence, right?
That was all one sentence.
All right, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Mengelberg,
Aye.
Commissioner Ide. Aye. Commissioner O'Donnell,
Aye.
Commissioner Shaw,
Aye.
Mayor Holliday.
Aye. Okay, moving on, general business 18-332, contract for project management, owners representative services for the police and municipal court building, Chief Band.
Good evening, Mayor and Commission.
Is your mic on?
Yeah.
Is it pointed toward you?
It is now.
Thank you.
I've got, do you have my PowerPoint coming up?
A PowerPoint, really?
Ooh,
Maybe Louis
yeah.
will please.
Oh my gosh, it's the library all over again.
She set the standard high.
I will get that for you.
Well, that's warming up. Ultimately, there's two things I kind of want to accomplish here. One is I'm going to be recommending and asking you to approve this contract for our project manager. The other thing I kind of want to do is there's two contracts that are going to be, there's this one and then there's another one in August, and that is for the architecture firm. That contract, this contract is $480,000. That contract is going to be, we're negotiating or will soon be negotiating, going to be somewhere between $1.5 million and hopefully not much more than that. But it is a substantial amount of money. My presentation for that would be identical to this one. And so my point is kind of to give you a comprehensive kind of, basically tell you what's going on, what we've done, and get an idea from you about whether or not you want another presentation in August for this other contract, or if it's going to be something that we just put on the consent agenda. And maybe I can get a feeling from you on that once we kind of get toward the end of this.
I've almost got it.
One of the things that, some of the information that I'm providing here is going to have to do with how the landscape has changed as we progress for this building. And one of the reasons I think it's important to talk about this a little bit, I don't think it's new to any of you that the construction costs have gone up. The thing that has been pretty important through this whole journey that to me backs up when we were going out into the community and talking about the utility fee was the things that we talked to them, the priorities that we gave to the community about this project. And we're going to do everything we can to hit those. But because our landscape, basically the costs are insane. It is just a really rough time to be building, that we're going to have to be making some tough decisions as we're moving forward with that. This slide I threw in here, this is a preliminary design that we have. I don't know if you know Ella.
Done by senior staff, I assume.
This was actually Ella Conkle. Tony's daughter is a world-renowned architect.
Yeah.
And you notice the guys in jail at the top are frowning. And the guys in the gym are smiling, and there's some cop cars. So unfortunately, it's going to be a little more complicated than that, but I got that a little bit ago, and I knew I was going to be putting that in at some point. So some of the kind of history of looking at the whole picture, like I said, back to our utility fee, is it was based on a project that we did with another architecture firm called McKinsey, and it was about needs assessment, a concept, costing, and then they also evaluated the site that we're at now at Mount Pleasant to see its suitability for building a police department. And ultimately that led to not just a police department, but also eventually to the commission at the time, it seemed like the right idea to put City Hall up there as well. That costing was done in 2014. In 2016, we went back to them, kind of watching some of the stuff in the library. There were some things they hadn't included, street improvements and a couple other things that we had added. So we basically had them do a little update. And so in 2016, this change, so they give you kind of a range of here's about what we think your project would cost. And they base it on architects go through and say, this is what a conference room, the size it should be. This is the size of an office. This is all these things. And the midpoint was about $18 million is what it looked like the middle of that range would have been for our building. In 2016, it was at $20 million. And there was a little bit in street improvements that had gone up, but it was mostly the cost of construction. And just as it kind of corresponds really good with this 2016, you can go to the next one, Katie. But just a couple things kind of to compare. The Canby Police Department, close by, they finished their building in 2012, $270 a square foot. That's just building costs. It did not include furniture, FF&E furniture, fixtures, and equipment. What we're looking at right now, the city of Beaverton is in the middle of a police building contract, coincidentally with the same architect that we're in negotiation with right now, and they're close to $500 a foot. Some of the things, and this is relevant to design of the building, everybody talks about steel.
Jim?
Yeah.
You need to keep the microphone pointed towards your face. There we go.
Okay. Everybody talks about steel. Steel, literally since January 2016, and these are numbers from completed projects. Steel has gone up since January 2016 to present, 33%. Brick, 53%. Drywall, 57%. And the winner is electrical, 97% increase. And the number we got was $46 per installed lineal foot back in 2016, and now it's 90. And this is where we're at right now. And so the importance of picking the right people, and this the person we have on board already that you know about has been really instrumental for us. What has gone on so far in looking at the dollar amount, one of the first things that our technical advisor did, and just as a reminder, he's worked on, not as designing the building architect, but as designing the police spaces inside of buildings. He is just a geek about that stuff and has worked on hundreds of police departments across this country and in other countries. We went through that assessment that we had paid McKinsey to do and literally went room by room and asked, okay, does your office need to be this big? Does this conference room need to be this big? Literally went through every space, and we reduced, you see the original program of
3,000 square feet.
40, yeah, we dropped it about 3,000 square feet. That corresponds at $500 a foot to $1.5 million. And then we also, as we're looking forward to how we're going to cost this, things like combined use of spaces. And I'm going to mention this because I think it's really important for you all to start processing this. One of the things in combined spaces that we started looking at was the court. A court is a space that most cities, and this city used to do that, the courtroom and the commission chambers were the same space. They're both unique in their design. There's requirements about safety, and they share a lot of characteristics. For us to build a courtroom that is only a courtroom, so it would only be used a couple days a week, which is how often our court is in session, is not a great use of public money. So in looking around, there's no other city in the county, and there aren't any. I think Beaverton has their own strictly court room, but they all share space. So we started looking at that, and we toured Kaiser and looked at their commission chambers, and they use a court there as well. So one of the conversations that we think needs to be had is that if we're going to be spending the money wisely, this, in my opinion, this commission chambers is too small. And And if we're going to be building a court, why don't we put the commission chambers and the court up there together? Eventually, we are going to have City Hall up there right next to it anyways, unless some major plan changes. When you go to put the City Hall there, you would not have to worry about the commission chambers because it would already be finished. The other consideration, I think, is it seems unlikely to me that prior to this police department being paid for with the utility fee that's in place, which is going to be somewhere between 15 and 20 years, it does not seem likely that a new City Hall is going to be built before then. I don't know where the money would come from. I might be wrong. But knowing that we've got 15 to 20 years plus build time in this space, if we move that up there, what could we do with this space? Does this City Hall need extra space? Yes, they do. I think that it would be probably an extensive study as to what would be the best use of this space, be it office space or public space or meeting space. I don't know. But there's a lot to consider there. But think about that as we move forward to building. Any questions you have about that, I can talk more about that later. Not yet, Katie.
Oh, sorry.
But that combined use of space, and there are other spaces inside the police department, we're doing the same thing in looking at how we're going to build this. Engineering considerations, this is another kind of major one in terms of costing to be thinking about. We had talked, that old picture that everybody has seen, there was 2-story on that. About half of it was 2-story, and we had looked at having courts and community meeting space, which would have been the new emergency EOC upstairs. One of the ways that we can save money is essential needs facilities have a certain seismic requirement. Other city buildings do not have the same requirement. If you build 1 story, there are ways to, the building would look the same, but there would essentially be a seismic seam. The court, code enforcement, they do not need to be built to that super standard. Our, basically, it's just warehouse space that is our evidence room or evidence storage space. That's a large space. It does not have to be to that same standard. And our advisor's been showing us ways that we can save money here and there. By pulling some of this space out of the essential needs, it's roughly $750 to maybe even $1 million in sales in savings by doing this. But we're likely going to be having to make some tough decisions about looking at 1 story instead of 2. Design-wise, lockering and some other kind of out-of-the-box sort of thing that relate to the last bullet of one of the tenets that I'm telling all of my staff as they're looking at, I want this or I want that. And I think that this is something that we really need to think about, because things like this lockering idea, which I don't want to go into right now. In 5 years, I won't be here. So for me to get all bent about what I think my office should look like or anything else, or a lot of the people who are going to be gone with me in 5 to 10 years, the way that the new workforce looks at space and the way that they want to work is completely different than what my generation is. And so kind of thinking about this building in that sense of it belongs to the community, it doesn't belong to people, specific people who have specific angles about things, and keeping the budget in mind and the things that we promised to the community and what they would see in this new space. Thank you. You can go forward, Katie. So the next steps, that architect, engineer contract. So this project manager position, basically the one that I want you to approve tonight, is somebody who's going to help us coordinate everything between the construction company and the architect. They're going to help us hammer out the contract with the architect who we've already selected. The way that we have come to this project manager and this architect, we've got a committee of people. Our technical advisor has been on the committee. Commissioner Shaw has been on this committee. And then I have several staff people who've been on it. And RFPs were sent out. It was done through QBS, which is qualification-based selection. And so this project manager will help us get this contract together. They basically keep the budget for us. They set a project schedule. They keep that schedule. There's a whole host of things that they're doing full-time. That contract will come before you in August, like I said. We are planning on going CMGC, and which, construction manager contract.
Thank you.
So, which is how the library was done. And we're going to get that construction company on board right away, basically because it is the architect and starts planning this with us. We want especially in light of this financial situation, we want them at the table, working through as early as possible. And we've gotten a lot of feedback that that's the thing to be doing right now. And then the design process will start, and there will be, that's some of the fun stuff that will be, public engagement with neighborhood association, other neighborhood associations. I envision at least one citywide open house where people can come in and weigh in. And very importantly, we're going to want a lot of commission input. And our employees too, getting them to look at this project. They're used to working one way and getting them to kind of open their eyes. So that, you can go to the next slide, Katie. That is all the information I have. I imagine you might have some questions, and I would kind of like to know if you want more for the architect when we bring that contract back.
Questions?
I think that, you said it's probably about $1.5 million for the architect's contract when that comes up, Jim, in August.
I think they would disagree, but we've got to negotiate that.
Yeah, so I'm thinking that probably for benefit of transparency, that we probably should not have that on consent agenda. That probably should be,
I agree.
But
you can make a short presentation. Maybe Mr. Lewis could help you with that.
Which one?
Questions?
Comments?
Mr. O'Donnell?
From my business experience, I can tell you it's a very volatile market out there. I'm not sure that even the quotes you gave are current. I deal a lot in steel, and with the recent tariffs, things are going through the roof, and nobody wants to give you a binding quote for more than maybe a couple weeks. That part's frightening, and the mayor has a construction background, and I can tell you from talking to others in the business, subcontractors don't even want to travel anymore. It's such a rich environment for them. So it's going to be challenging to hold the line on cost. Having said that, I would say, I think we need to focus, we have to understand the difference between want versus need. And that's going to be a pushing match, and it'll probably be an internal pushing match too. And in plain language, do we want a Kmart, Walmart, or, people cringe at the thought of a Macy's. So in other language, do we want a utilitarian business, or do we want something ostentatious? And I think we'll strike more towards the utilitarian. I think that shows, I realize that buildings are a statement of the community. I mean, they have value in and of themselves, a pride value, but I think it's going to be a challenging thing. The only final thing I'd say is the 1 versus 2 story thing. I mean, let's study the incremental cost and what that means to us in 5 years. It may be a larger outlay now, but is it worth it? Or can we build this so that structurally it's ready to add a second story if we need, without building a second story today? So those are my thoughts, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Hyde?
The thought of combining the court and the commission chambers together, I think it's a great idea. I like it because just the use of the space would be utilized. As long as there's other rooms within the building for conferences and just meeting space, and so that, because this room, for instance, is used a lot just for meetings. And so there would be a need probably 5 days a week for that if City Hall was there. So I just think that going minimal, being a minimalist in that area and utilizing the space to the best of your ability I would totally support that.
I would say it's great that you have a police expert on the team to understand how to maximize the space for your specific needs, but also to keep in mind maximum flexibility because needs and technology changes and space needs change with it. So if the building can be flexible, it'll stand the test of time better. And the other thing to weigh is ongoing operating costs, and if there's ways to build it so that it's more energy efficient or less cost to operate, even if it might cost a little bit more to construct, that's something to consider as well.
Anybody else?
Yes.
Commissioner Shaw?
Well, having sat on this committee, it was a couple things that have been very informative. One is we've toured quite a few existing stations and got input on fairly new ones. So to see what, that's just interesting. Do you see these guys, you think you'd have all these things ironed out by now, you like on the hallway when they do a rail along the walls, that this is where the officers are coming down with all their equipment stuff and hitting those walls. Well, so they'll put a rail there. And how many police stations still make that out of wood? And you know what that looks like after a year, you know, so.
3 weeks, yeah.
Well, and so that's what we're finding out as we take these tours and stuff, and that's the nice thing about this. And then, and using the same CMGC program template that we use for the library, which came in on time and on budget, which is a nice thought right here. But it's going to be a great program for what is in our control. The pricing thing and the cost and stuff are just, you know, what they're gonna be, so,
Is that it?
yeah.
So the only thing I have to say, Chief, is when we talked about this, we promised the people that this was going to be a building good for 50 years. And because of cost considerations, I don't want us chipping this out and having to read in the paper 15 years from now that as the mayor at the time, I somehow let this slip up and now we need a new police station 15 years from now. So this is the space considerations and making sure that we're building it to be able to be good for that 50-year period is of utmost importance to me. With that, is there a motion?
Citizen comments?
Oh, I hadn't intended to, but come on up, Mr. Gifford.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Commissioners. My name is William Gifford. I live in Oregon City. I'm really taken by Commissioner O'Donnell's comment that buildings can be a reflection, a statement about our community. I'm also 100% support of the mayor's comment about this being a building with a legacy, that we want this to last, and I really hope we don't cut corners. As land use chair for the Hellendale Neighborhood Association, we just received a presentation from the Clackamas County Extension Service. They're going to be building a new building across the street from the court, from the county facility right there. And I don't know if you've seen that design. It's really gorgeous. And they're going to be using cross-laminate timber. And I don't know what the cost comparisons are between CLT and steel, talking about steel prices going up, and the fact that cross-laminate timber is all locally made and locally produced. I just hope that some consideration is being given to that. And I really want this to be, well, you know how hard we've all worked on this. I don't want this to just be a quickie job. And if we have to make some sacrifices someplace, I'd be willing to find what we can do to make this the best we can.
Thank you, sir. Now, is there a motion?
Move to approve 18-332 contract for project management and owner representative services for the police and municipal courts building.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Shaw, seconded by Commissioner Eyes. Further discussion? Seeing none, call roll.
Commissioner Mengelberg?
Aye.
Commissioner Ide?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Shaw?
Aye.
Mayor Holliday?
Aye. Anybody want to pull any consent agenda? Is there a motion?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Mengelberg, seconded by Commissioner Ide. For discussion, call roll.
Commissioner Mengelberg,
Aye.
Commissioner Ide,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Shaw,
Aye.
Mayor Holliday.
Aye. Communications, Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Evening, Commissioners. We'll start with an update from Ms. Turway.
Thank you very much. I wanted to invite you and the community to our equitable housing open house that we'll be having Monday at City Hall in Chambers from 4 to 6 p.m.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next, I have an update from Mr. Lewis, John Lewis.
Yeah, a couple items. First of all, talked about the 2018 Regional Transportation Plan update. Just wanted to give you a little bit of information in that they're wrapping that project up. It's been a long process. So many of you may have chimed in on this already, but they're hoping to close that process and the public input period on August 13th. They've got a pretty dynamic webpage that you might want to pursue. One thing that they've done, they have the full plan, which is about 4 inches thick of paper, if you're interested in really some good reading. But they've also condensed it down to something that's 32 pages, which has got a lot of good information in it. And they also have online an interactive map which shows the region's projects, including all of our projects. And our projects haven't changed since the last time I reported that. So there's no real meaningful change with regard to what we've already been talking about. But there's, in addition to the map, in addition to this kind of condensed version, there's an online survey. And I encourage you to go fill it out. It took me about 15 minutes to fill it out. It's pretty high level, but I think they're looking for community members to do it. So you and all the TV listening audience should take a look at that. Again, there is another opportunity, which is if you want to comment on person, the Metro Council is having a public hearing on August 2nd at the Metro office. And, there's way more information online, but I just want to make sure you are aware of that. The other thing, is there any questions about that before I move on? No? Okay. The other thing I want to mention is at the C4 retreat, I had an opportunity to connect with Teresa Christopherson, who works for Clackamas County. She is in their administrative department, but she is associated with the county's transportation program. So a lot of people don't know this, but the county has 3 transportation programs. One is called Transportation Reaching People, which is more of a shuttle service that helps seniors and folks with special needs to get to places they need around the community. That's a countywide program. They also have a couple of volunteer programs. There's a helping vet program that helps connect veterans with other veterans who need rides, and another one called Ride Together. And the reason why I'm mentioning all that is because in talking to Teresa, she was through House Bill 2017. There is a pocket of money that has been allocated to TriMet, but it's for what they call last mile connectors, and only counties can apply for these funds. But there are things like ride programs, so like Ride Connection. Some of you are familiar with GroveLink, and so the county is pursuing that with several jurisdictions, but we're most likely to be successful with that in that the county has a program. We need to figure out whether or not that's really how a future Ride Connection kind of a program would work, what it would really look like. So there's, through this House bill, there's $3 million a year that's allocated for these kind of last mile connector service programs. And about $1 million of that goes to the existing programs that lost funding. It's long-term funding, so there's $2 million left. Oregon City, because of its population makeup and the need for connecting jobs, and also through the last update that that TriMet did with the future vision for the Southwest bus service. There was a lot of changes they made in Oregon City. They added a lot of bus trips in Oregon City, but they also added a designation called Community Jobs Connector Service Areas. And that was, I don't know if you remember Commissioner Pauley, she was a real advocate for this, wanting to reestablish some of the bus service up in kind of like the South End area and some of those places where TriMet cut service. And so out of that process, there's on the regional map, which includes Oregon City, there's an area that includes some of those areas off Warner Parrott, maybe as far as Partlow, circling around to the community college, that they call these community jobs connector programs. And so it's in a plan, the funding's right, our demographics is right. We're quite likely to be successful in getting a grant. And what that would look like, I'm definitely not advocating for Oregon City to have, to be the manager of this transit system, but we would need to figure that out. So anyway, that's the update. The timeline, the other thing that I wanted to share, because it is a very fast timeline, like anything with this, it seems like anything associated with this House bill, whether it be value pricing or the I-205 project, is pretty short. And I'm not gonna, so applications are due August 15th. So we have to help put that application together. There's not gonna be much opportunity for commission buy-in beyond this meeting, so I wanted to give that little update, make sure there's nothing that you're seeing as problematic.
Questions, comments?
No, great job, John. Thank you.
Okay. Next, an update from Ms. Brown.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Thanks. As you guys well know, one of your goals is to enhance communications and increase citizen feedback and participation. So in an effort to help accomplish that goal, we've hired the ETC Institute to help us provide a community satisfaction survey. This community satisfaction survey that will be provided by ETC Institute is an objective way to assess our residents and also a way for them to rate our city services. So many communities do these surveys every other year, so that way we can measure trends and see if we're moving the mark in what we're doing and the services that we're providing. It also allows the folks that are taking the survey to provide their input and to help set priorities, i.e. We've got all of our departments sectioned out with the services that they provide. So we'll be able to hear back from our residents and they can tell us of all of these services, which ones are the most important. I.e. with code enforcement, is it really important that we're enforcing parking restrictions, or would they rather see people's lawns mowed more frequently? Just an example. And then also the Institute will help us compare where we're at with our regional partners in cities that are our same size, and then also nationally. So the delivery method of this survey is, it's a 7-page survey. It'll be mailed to a variety of households within Oregon City. The households will be able to take the survey on paper, mail it back. They'll also have a specific link. They can go online and provide their feedback there. They can also call a phone number and they can take the survey over the phone. This survey, like I said, is a breakdown of all of our departments with all of our services. Folks will be asked to rate the importance of each of the services. And then we'll also have some open-ended questions that will elicit feedback. So that way it's not just rate your satisfaction, yes or no, but there'll also be an opportunity for folks to provide us a little more information on maybe what they think we need to focus on. ETC Institute will be back to you guys at a work session in October, and they'll provide you the results. What I think is particularly interesting, and one of the reasons why we went with this company over others, is they are able to geolocate all of the surveys. So we'll get a map and we'll be able to see where there's some sentiment and where there's some trends with our services and with people's satisfaction and feedback. And to me, I think that's particularly important and interesting for you guys to see. So we're not just limiting this to these households separately. We're going to have an online survey, so that way it can be disseminated via Facebook and Nextdoor and however we want to digitally. But when ETC comes to you guys and gives you the presentation, they're just presenting on the statistically valid surveys, those that are mailed to the households. So you guys will get a final report that is 4 inches, and we'll be able to drill down to each respondent's answers. And we'll also give you a separate report with the survey results as well. So that way we can see, do they compare, do they not? But just know when the ETC comes back to you guys and gives the presentation, it's really about the statistically valid results of the survey. Do you guys have any questions?
I guess I do.
Yeah.
I think it's really helpful to get feedback on specific city services, but I'd also be interested to know what our citizens' priorities are.
Absolutely.
And that, like, for instance, homelessness was not on anybody's radar screen maybe 5 years ago. But it's an emerging issue, and it's not necessarily a city service, but it's something that we as a commission could prioritize as part of our goals. Or, you know, what are other issues that are making their life difficult? What are their concerns?
Right.
Some of those more global questions, so that we can be seeing the bigger picture.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those open-ended questions will help elicit that feedback, but we'll definitely take one more review of it and make sure that there's the opportunity to provide that.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
You think I have a question?
I would be surprised if you didn't.
I won't let you down. What's that survey gonna cost us?
I don't remember the exact contract. It's not more than $10,000.
Well, oh, and you said, are the only statistically valid responses the hard copies, that those that would respond versus on electronically or SurveyMonkey, we're not gonna count those as statistically valid?
So the 2,000 that are getting mailed back, they're expecting at least 300 to 400 to come back to us. So yes, those are the ones that are counted as statistically valid, because what they're looking for is they're looking for the age, the gender, and the income that is the populace of Oregon City. So we have to ask those specific questions, and we have to make sure that the respondents that are responding back aren't my 10-year-old kid that got on Facebook and started clicking answers.
Or a Russian bot?
So we are going to be able to,
Those are the qualifiers for a valid response? Because I mean, that
there's
data is
six
out
or
there
seven other
everywhere.
ones.
I mean, that data exists everywhere already. So you're saying the respondent needs to fill that in and be considered valid?
Absolutely. And they'll be able to do that online because they'll be given a specific code. They'll
And
be
is that
able
a
to do
single-use
that.
code that the same person can't
It's
respond
per
to 20
household.
times? Okay, so
You
that's
got it.
not bad. Well, I make no bones about it. I think that we have underutilized the position that you occupy. I've been very critical of it. I think the job is to increase communication with the community. I certainly encourage using, whether it be Nextdoor or other social media. I think we can do much better at that. So this would be a good first step. But my goal is to utilize this position and make it highly effective and bring back to us. You know, you sit up here and you don't know the voice of the community. And if this tells us the voice of the community, and I really don't even like filters. I don't like that it comes through, even some of these committees are so narrow. I want to hear from the whole community. So if you've got an identifier that allows a one response per household, and it's a $10,000 bill, if that helps me do my job up here on behalf of the community, I'm all for it.
You'll have 400 pages of those unfiltered comments.
Well, I'm expecting you to consolidate for me so I don't have to look for the
I was
answer.
counting on you to do that for me, Frank.
I already spent time watching planning commission meetings. Let somebody else do that.
Commissioner Shaw, do you have anything?
Were you done,
I
Tony?
One at a time. Did you have something
Yeah,
for this?
no.
Okay.
Just very briefly, I for one am thrilled that you are here and that you have done a tremendous amount of work that has fallen on other staff for so many years. And, they're not the experts necessarily in those communication type matters. So, and I've watched you take a big relief off of them. So I appreciate that. I just have one quick question on the survey. Are they generic questions or, ones that are just kind of can go to any city, or are they very specific to Oregon City?
That's a great question. So in order for the ETC Institute to provide us national statistics, they did have to be fairly generic in the way that the questions are asked. But we could, as I've told all the directors, Oregon Cityfy them and use our verbiage so that way people understand that maybe community services is really, we're breaking it down into parks, trails, recreation services. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Good enough.
there was a little leniency, but we couldn't get too cute.
But the
with it.
write-in is where you can get more specific. in
Yes,
the action
ma'am.
plan. Okay, I'm done.
Shirley?
I'm thrilled that you're doing it. It's really good to have valid statistical information to make good decisions, so thank you.
Great, thank you.
Now, Commissioner Shaw?
One more thing for me before I'm done, unless you'd like me to go after you.
Go ahead.
Okay. The last thing is, under my city manager's report, after the last meeting, there was some discussion about the Senate Bill 1573 and how it relates to Oregon City's charter. We put together a memo kind of providing an update of what the Senate bill says, what the lawsuit in Corvallis and Philomath versus the state, where that's at, what the decision, trying to summarize the decision from the circuit court on that case, why it issued the decision the way it did. And then there was a question about, we're currently moving forward at the recommendation from staff that we approve annexations without sending them to the vote of the people, based on what the language of Senate Bill 1573, provided they meet the criteria within Senate Bill 1573. There was a question of, are there other options? What might those be? And I think we've identified, we could enter into our own separate declaratory judgment action in Clackamas County Circuit Court to answer that question of our charter language versus what the Senate bill language requirements are. What would happen if an application came in and met the criteria? And so essentially it would be approved, but we decided to, as a commission, to send it to the voters as well. In consultation, discussion with the attorney, our recommendation would be, if that were to occur, to also enter a separate declaratory judgment. We think, I think state law is clear on if these criteria are met, you shouldn't, it doesn't go to the voters. So, entering a concurrent declaratory judgment with circuit court to answer that question, should the commission decide to take that route. So once again, just trying to provide where the court cases are. The Court of Appeals heard arguments on last Friday, the 13th. No timeline for when the Court of Appeals will issue a decision, but that would be binding statewide at that point. So we'll continue to provide those updates as more information does come forward. And then myself and Ms. Richter would be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Maybe a comment. I was actually a bit confused why we're doing this as a summation by you, because it does not invite public interaction to it. I feel, I'm not sure that, I hope the message that we're sending, I hope the message that we're not sending is that this commission that has sat here for 2 years since this bill was passed in 2016, having passed judgment on many, many applications, at this belated point in time needs an explanation as to what the basis of the judgment was. I hope that's not the message that comes out. There's so much to this thing that, and I'm not going to go into a history lesson, and people don't even realize how it was passed and the relationship between 1533 and 1573. I'm glad that you included in the presentation, and I know I brought it forward, a little bit more balanced presentation than it was originally. And, I didn't hear anything about, there's a community of Sherwood that has actually decided to establish a moratorium on annexations greater than 2 acres, and I would have been curious to hear about that. But what I look for in any presentation is balance. So maybe off the record later, you can tell me what is the Sherwood situation. I'm aware of the others. I stay in contact with the League of Oregon Cities. I read all the prior court cases. I understand, but it's an odd presentation by the city manager. I would have preferred that the community be enabled to comment. So if it's advisory or informational, we'll just leave it at that.
Further questions, comments from anybody on this particular subject? Okay.
That concludes
You
my updates tonight, yes.
Now, Commissioner Shaw?
Well, thank you, Mayor Holliday. First of all, the Ermitanger Open House, I think we all kind of attended that, and I wish Mr. Phil Lewis was here tonight. I'd like to congratulate him and Rocky, great job, but also a little more recognition to Rochelle Parsh, who kind of put that all together. Didn't get a lot of recognition that day, but there was a lot of things going on, so I want to make sure she got some recognition on that. Coasters Crossing had a little soft opening last Thursday, and they're open today, starting with a limited menu because they don't have their vent in their hood in the kitchen yet. So, but it looks like it's going to be a success. It really feels like it. He's got enough signs and stuff out there right now, so we'll see how that goes. And the First City Festival was well attended even without the Brew Fest there. So it was a lot of people there, and it was 100 degrees, I think, so, but very successful. And so lastly, with, again, the kind of the city of firsts, I got invited to go up to the, as I was telling in executive session, I went up to the high school Monday morning to the last day of driver's training class. They have to do at the end of their class, at the end of the term, they have to do a presentation. And so I got to go up and visit that. But the thing that was, is kind of cool is that they have a partnership with the college, and they developed enough money to create this, what's called a cubby. And it's actually this cabinet they've mounted on the wall, has all these slots in it, and those students have to put their cell phones in there for 2 hours while they're in class. That's what I mean. It's not only just for they have to learn the safety of that, of not touching their phone for 2 hours while they're driving and stuff, but just actually being away from their phone for 2 hours, period, was amazing to watch that. And this is the first one that's in the area. So that was a really cool presentation they did on that. So anyway, that's what I've got tonight. Thanks.
Commissioner Mecklenburg, you got anything for us?
I would echo Commissioner Shaw's comments on the Ermitanger House. I took the tour. It's very impressive. Just feels so authentic, even though it's not the actual furniture. You really get a feeling for what it was like to live back there. So well done. Also, the first city celebration is always a great celebration of our city, and it was wonderful. And I congratulate Main Street for their good work on that.
I echo everything they just said. But I just wanted to add, thank you to Rocky for just your long suffering and your patience and your persistence over the last how many years? Don't even tell me, to get the Ermitanger to where it is today. So we appreciate you and we recognize that. And then I just have a newsletter that I want to pass out to you because it is an awesome newsletter put out by the Downtown Association. And let's see.
Is there an electronic version?
There is, it's on the downtown.
All right, then I'll go look.
Yeah,
I
it's
just don't-
really a
I just don't see
good,
the paper.
yeah, that's fine. And it's just a great newsletter, take a look at it. And then the other thing I want to announce is there's a community brainstorming session on October 21st at 5:30 PM at the library for the Downtown Association. They just want to know what the community has to say about what they want to see up and coming downtown. So I'm going to give you one of these too. You can put it on your calendar if you'd like.
And that was August 21st, right?
Yes, August 21st.
Oh, yeah.
And
Like you said, October.
you could pass that down to Katie just if she wants.
Certainly.
Yes. And I think that was it. Let me
Oh,
check.
come on.
That was it. I had a lot more, but they kind of stole my thunder.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Well, I guess what I'd say is we've done so many good things lately, and yes, Ermitanger House was one, concerts in the park, big hit, great, totally enjoyable. The first city celebration, and the only thing I'd say to all those things is the work is never done. You know, you've never crossed the finish line. You can always do a little bit better. Ermitanger House, we can take to the next level, concerts in the park, whatever. Just remember, the work is never done. Congratulations on our progress to date, but let's keep on keeping on.
Wow, our own little black cloud.
Yeah. That's nice.
It's not a black cloud. It's a statement that if you feel you've reached it, if you feel Armentinger House is where it needs to be for the next 20 years, then you say, I'm done. Are you done?
No, we're not done.
Okay, that's what
I'm
that
not
was the
done.
point of the
So-
discussion.
I definitely attended the Ermatinger House grand reopening. Rocky, can you just give me a guess? When the house was originally built, $1,500 maybe? 2,000 at the outside?
I have no idea.
Yeah, so I'm guessing probably somewhere in the neighborhood. So it's just to show what $750,000 of public money can do.
But we're not done yet. We're not done yet.
I'll talk about positive mind.
I attended.
That's your inflation number, Jim, you get to work with that.
Twice I
And there's no
attended
steel in
the
it.
First City Festival, went down in the morning for a while, and then came back and did a shift at the entrance at the bridge. Did you get my text? Okay, so we gotta talk about that. Beyond that, I've sort of been checked out over the last couple of weeks because we're moving our business in Canby, and that's required a lot of extra time. So after this next couple of weeks, I'll be a little more checked back into what's going on.
What's going on?
Oh, and yeah, it was the fourth meeting of the Willamette Falls Locks Commission today. We actually had a full house, so we had, I think, out of the 23 appointees, there were 22 of us at the meeting. And we're just working on towards finding some actual numbers about what the capital cost is gonna be to get, you're talking about the original capital cost to get everything fixed and everything put back together so that the locks will function. And of course, you get, the Corps says one thing, the engineers, the architects say one thing, and then the guys who actually been working on it for the last 20 years say something completely different. So we have to get someplace where everybody's kind of in consensus, because Representative Parrish in West Lynn wants to put together a funding request for the legislature, but that request has to be done by the 19th of September. That's the deadline for them to get those things into the process for next year for some reason. I don't know. So we're working on that, and then working on, the idea of who's gonna own it, how's it gonna be operated and maintained. The base numbers say that the Corps was operating it when they were operating it full-time at about $500,000 a year. That was what the cost was. Of course, the Corps is famous for not doing maintenance and the other kinds of things that let it get to that spot too. So, and there's a lot of more data that we're gonna have to gather, and I think that we have another meeting in September, and then we have a quickie meeting in October to make some decisions going into the legislative session. So that's it for that. Anything else for good of the order? We're adjourned.